Hi friends, it's Queen Alita. I'm back today with a prophetic message from the Lord. This one is based on a dream that I had on March 8th this year. So I just want to welcome you back to the channel. Welcome to everyone who is new. Just a quick disclaimer. It's very important to note that not every prophetic message is meant for everybody. So just because you're watching this, listening to this, does not mean the word is meant for you. It is so important that you are able to hear God's voice for yourself. Take it back to Him. Ask Him for confirmation. If it is for you, He'll definitely confirm it. The main thing is that you're able to hear His voice for yourself, grow that relationship for yourself as well. And I know that for some of you, this message is confirmation. God has already spoken to you about this, and this is His way of confirming what He's been saying to you. If you do have any questions, please make sure that, again, you just go back to Him. He will answer those questions for you, okay? So I had this dream on March 8th, like I said. In this dream, I was in a church, in some kind of church building, a large church building, and there were two areas. One was downstairs and the other one was upstairs. In the downstairs area where the congregation was, it was a younger congregation. It was people in my age group. And when I went upstairs, so I shifted from there to go upstairs. And upstairs, there were a lot of older people, older men, just older people in general, right? And I remember seeing this one old man who was not sitting in the pews. He was sitting, his seat was in the aisle. And he was really old. And I remember just a little girl walking past him, and he was trying to get her attention because he needed help with something, and she didn't hear him. So I got up to see if I could help him. But when I did that, somebody else walked up to him, a young man, younger than me, went to help him. And I sat down in my seat again. Sorry, I had to re-record this part. So next up, after the guy helped the old man, right, I was sitting in my own seat as well, which was also outside of the pews. It was also in the aisle, and I was having knee problems. And I noticed that the pastor of the church was talking to some people, and then he came to me and he said, can you give up your seat for somebody? And I pointed to my knee like, no, sorry, I actually have a problem with my knee. I did feel a bit guilty, but I was telling the truth. My knee was painful. And so he kind of, because I was in the aisle, he kind of moved my bag out of the way. I guess it was somehow obstructing people, which was fine. And then he went on to preach. Then he came back to me, and this time he was on my case. He was just really upset with me for not giving up my seat and telling me that it was for some useless reason, that I think he said something about, oh, you just have gas and you don't want to move. And I was like, no, it's a more serious problem than that. I have a problem with my knee. So the way he was twisting the truth was a bit concerning to me. And then this time he kicked my bag, like he put his whole foot on it. Well, he was wearing shoes, obviously, but he was rough with it, and he left and went to carry on with what he was doing. So I got up and I was like, no, this is not going to happen. No. And I confronted him. And, I said, what he was doing was wrong. There was a confrontation there, and he kept trying to twist the truth and create this whole scenario that hadn't happened. And then I said to him, actually what I expected from you was for you to lay hands on me and pray for me when I told you that my knee was not was in pain, that I was in pain because of my knee. And he was like, what, you expected me to pray? And I said, yes, that's what I expected you to do because you're the pastor, right? And he was trying to argue with me, and then these two younger guys came up to me and they started to pray for me. And that was the dream. So I remember waking up from this dream and just remembering how emotionally charged I was when I was confronting that pastor. It felt so intense. And I know that, I haven't had the best experiences in church, just like a lot of people. I don't know about you, but I know that, it kind of triggered some of that. When I woke up, I was like, man, this just takes me back to when I was in churches, trying to find a church home. Anyway, the message that the Lord has for us today is a message for Okay, let me just start. Let me look at my notes and just start at the beginning, right? So in this dream, right, when I went from going downstairs to upstairs, it had to do with some kind of elevation, which was related to maturity. Downstairs was a younger crowd, people more my age, but I went to go and congregate upstairs with older people, even though there were a few people who were younger than me, like the little girl and the guys who prayed for me and the one guy who helped the old man. The majority of the congregation was a bunch of older people. I just have to quickly go back to the dream. There's a tiny part I forgot to mention. In the dream, when I was, arguing with the pastor, and he was trying to twist the truth, I told him that, the way that he had treated me was wrong, kicking my bag, accusing me of, having a minor issue when it was really a major issue. And the people around were listening. I was asking them, like, am I wrong? And they were just like, no, that, they were backing me up. Like, yeah, we saw all that and you're right. So I just remembered that and I thought I'd throw that in there. So anyway, back to the interpretation. For whoever this word is for, the Lord is saying that you have matured. There's been a level of maturity in terms of your spiritual journey with the Lord. And you are not, still at a, more junior level in your walk with Him, in understanding the things of the Spirit. And so He has elevated you because of your understanding, right? So I went from downstairs to upstairs in the dream. I was surrounded by older people. But here's the thing, even in those spaces where, there are older people in the faith, people that have been in the faith. So we have two groups in the upstairs situation. We have older people who were in the pews, sitting there, part of the congregation. We had the old man who was in the aisle on his own. And then we had the few younger people that were there that were helpful, that were doing the work of the Lord. So I believe that upstairs part represents people, the main congregation are people who have been in the faith for a long time, but they haven't been, they've kind of been complacent. Yes, that's the word I'm looking for. They've been complacent, they've conformed, they're kind of just there, and they represent people that have been in the faith longer but haven't really matured and grown that much. And then you have the old man who was in the aisle. He represents the very, very few from his generation. Yes, that's the main thing. It's a generational thing. Sorry, that just dropped in my spirit right now. Is that there's the older generations who have been in the church for a long time have become complacent, but you have a very, very, very small number represented by that one old man who was sitting in the aisle and not in the pews. He wasn't in agreement with everybody else because he was sitting in the aisle. He was sitting in the part where people move. So he represents the very few from his generation who see the need for change, who see that things need to be done differently, who represent people that move with the Spirit, because he was in the aisle, in the place where movement happens, and not in the place where sitting happens, where you get spiritual obesity, right, which is in the pews. So that's what that old man was representing. And then the younger people that, the guy who helped him, the people that prayed over me, they represent the younger generations, the people that God is raising up right now to bring the change, to do the actual work that God has given them to do, not because it looks good on paper, not like the Pharisees who did everything right. They followed the laws to the T, right? But their hearts were not in the right place. They were not doing according to what God was calling them to do. They were just doing things according to what society and tradition wanted them to do, So a lot of people are out of their calling in the older generations because they in the church, and I need to do what I think is right, what I think looks good, what I know people will approve of, and they're not, or rather just approve, and they're not worried about what God is actually telling them to do, where they need to be. And this younger generation is coming in to serve in the way that God has called them to serve. The pastor, who was not very nice to me, just representing leadership, who have really abused their power, been manipulative. There's been a strong spirit of Jezebel in a lot of these churches within leadership, and these people have become very manipulative, twisting the truth, not facing their wrongs, but instead trying to make everybody else look bad, especially people that challenge them. So God is basically speaking to those of you who are non-conformists, whose eyes have been opened by him to show you the things that you need to be part of in terms of changing the way things are within his church, right? So the Lord is saying to you today that he's going to put words in your mouth. He's going to give you the courage to speak up against injustices and against things that may be happening in these communities, in these church communities that are just wrong because of manipulation of leaders, of people who are the elders of the churches. You are going to be given the words and the courage. I think that's the main thing, to be able to speak up and say what you're doing is actually wrong. And when you do that, others around you, those who have been in the church for a long time, remember I was upstairs with all the older people, the older generation, they will begin to agree with you. And people will begin to agree with you, right? The people that I noticed who were agreeing with me were not the older generation. There were suddenly more people who were my age that were agreeing. So it's like God is going to start opening the eyes of the people that he's raising up to really see the things that are going on and to not turn the other way when the injustices are called out, when things are pointed out that are wrong. And so the part of scripture that the Lord led me to for this was Luke 11 verse 37 to 54. I'm going to read it for us here real quick. So the title says, Jesus criticizes the religious leaders. As Jesus was speaking, one of the Pharisees invited him home for a meal. So he went in and took his place at the table. His host was amazed to see that he sat down to eat without first performing the hand-washing ceremony required by Jewish custom. Then the Lord said to him, "You Pharisees are so careful to clean the outside of the cup and the dish, but inside you are filthy, full of greed and wickedness. Fools! Didn't God make the inside as well as the outside? So clean the inside by giving gifts to the poor, and you will be clean all over. What sorrow awaits you, Pharisees, for you are careful to tithe even the tiniest income from your herb gardens, but you ignore justice and the love of God. You should tithe, yes, but do not neglect the more important things. What sorrow awaits you, Pharisees, for you love to sit in the seats of honor in the synagogues and receive respectful greetings as you walk in the marketplaces. Yes, what sorrow awaits you, for you are like hidden graves in a field. People walk over them without knowing the corruption they are stepping on." "Teacher," said an expert in religious law, "you have insulted us too in what you just said." "Yes," said Jesus, "what sorrow also awaits you, experts in religious law, for you crush people with unbearable religious demands, and you never lift a finger to ease the burden. What sorrow awaits you, for you build monuments for the prophets your own ancestors killed long ago, but in fact you stand as witnesses who agree with what your ancestors did. They killed the prophets, and you join in their crime by building the monuments. This is what God in his wisdom said about you. I will send prophets and apostles to them, but they will kill some and persecute the others. As a result, this generation will be held responsible for the murder of all God's prophets from the creation of the world, from the murder of Abel to the murder of Zechariah, who was killed between the altar and the sanctuary. Yes, it will certainly be charged against this generation. What sorrow awaits you, experts in religious law, for you remove the key to knowledge from the people. You don't enter the kingdom yourselves. You prevent others from entering." As Jesus was leaving, the teachers of religious law and the Pharisees became hostile and tried to provoke him with many questions. They wanted to trap him into saying something they could use against him. This particular passage really for me resonated so much because of what was happening in the dream. The way that that pastor was questioning me, twisting the truth, trying to use his power and his knowledge to make me look like I was in the wrong, to make me look like a liar. And yet he's the one who was leading everybody astray. But God is opening the eyes of people. But he's going to do that through you, who this word is for. You have to speak up and start calling these behaviors out. I know there's someone right now who is listening. I just got a strong sense that God has been putting it on your heart to call people out in your church community, specifically people in leadership positions. And you have been either afraid, hesitant is a stronger word that comes here. Hesitant because of their position. Not so much fear, but hesitation because you want to be respectful. You want to honor them. You don't want to rock the boat. But this is the time to rock the boat. Jesus didn't come to bring peace. He came to divide. He came to bring a godly division. And the Lord is going to use you to do that in this time because he's revamping everything. No, he's not revamping. No. He's tearing everything down and he's building a new church. And that is the key thing that we need to remember here. So everything needs to be taken down brick by brick and allow God to build his new church. So that's the word for today, friends. I pray that it has blessed you, if it is for you, and I will see you in the next video. Always remember that God is a good Father. He loves you so much because you, my friends, are so deeply special to him.